Hey, this is Matthew Key, and this is a Tundra Angels Angle. If you're new to this newsletter, I write weekly insider tactics as an investor that I wish I would have known 10 years ago as a startup founder. This week's post is personal. It's called When Optimism is Alarming, a story of how optimism can cloud execution and dissuade investors. So one-time read-through, here we go. I'm going to be real with you here. Being real was not always something that I could do well, and that's why I'm writing this post. I heard somewhere that a startup acts like a mirror to a founder. A startup is run by people who have strengths and weaknesses. Entrepreneurship is personal. And as we run our startup, it creates exposure for us and everyone around us. The startup that founders run is a mirror that reflects the good, the bad, and the ugly of that founder. By nature, I tend to be optimistic. If I'm being totally honest about the way that I handle my startup, I was dangerously optimistic, alarmingly optimistic. That is, I had a level of blind optimism that transcended the practical reality of what I was actually facing. The litmus test for this was when my mother-in-law or my father-in-law would ask me how my company was going. That's always a true litmus test for those who are married, right? I would respond, "It's going great," and then share some good things that were happening. My wife, who is more of a realist, and I would talk later, and she would say, "Why did you say that things were going well? You just told me yesterday that you were frustrated about such and such, or discouraged about this and that." But it wasn't just with my in-laws. I was also overly optimistic about the business, my startup, and its future to my advisors and investors. My optimism was a compulsion, but alarmingly, my optimism was not based in the reality of my situation. On August 18th, 2018, I wrote a reflection in my journal. And I said, quote, "I think this tendency is a personality trait or something. I tend to be more of an optimist of things in general. I tend to see the glass half full often. And in thinking about this is also reflected in my monthly startup updates." Now, I've learned and have developed a much healthier sense of optimism and realism since my founder days. I'll pick up with my founder story back in a minute, but for a few minutes, let's fast forward to my role as an investor now and how this optimism is perceived from my side of the table. Leaning optimistic. Most founders I talk to are optimistic about the future. It wouldn't be high-growth startups if optimism didn't exist. Yet with founders, there should be a continual tension of optimism versus realism. And in addition to optimism, every founder must possess a strong sense of realism and be able to activate it at a moment's notice. The hidden secret is that investors can often tell when a founder is highly optimistic and is avoiding being real about a situation. When a founder comes off highly optimistic about a situation, two things may happen. One, investors read between the lines, or investors draw incorrect conclusions about how things are going. I once was talking to an investor about an update that I had received from a startup. A different investor received that same update, and we happened to chat about it. This investor told me, "If I'm reading through the lines correctly on the startup's update, it sounds like they are bleeding cash." I had separate interactions with the company and knew that the company was going through a hard time. Yet the founder of the company did not come out and directly state the challenges the company was facing. Instead, they hinted at some of the challenges in the update, but dressed it up in a veneer of optimism about the future. Now, if the situation was that dire, why didn't the startup founder come out and directly say it? In a completely separate startup example, I was once discussing some thoughts on a given startup with an investor. This particular investor had not heard anything for the company for a while. This investor told me, "I think Jack is a little loose with money. The future is always bright in his world with no thought of what the cost is." That's my take, at least. This investor's imagination had been running wild, and the investor was drawing radical conclusions about the founder and business, ungrounded in reality. But do you blame the investor? The founder didn't take control of their own narrative, of their own business, leaving founder assumptions and their business up to chance. See, if founders don't filter optimism and realism well, then an investor's imagination will control your narrative of your company, of your future, because you didn't own up about how it's actually going in your company. Only a founder should possess control over the company's narrative. Once those investor assumptions are misplaced, it's very hard for a founder to take the reins of the company narrative again. Why don't founders just come out and say it? I think there are two reasons why founders do not own up to the reality of their situation. Be real. One, the founder might not actually accurately see the situation for what it is. Occasionally, I see my former founder self and certain founders that I talk to. The founder lays out the state of the business. In some cases, I can see the landmines in front of the founder that they will step on in a matter of weeks or months. Yet the founder is completely optimistic about the future. The founder may not be able to get objective enough to see the information that they need to see. This was my situation as a founder. Depending on my relationship with the founder, I tell them there's no reason to be optimistic here. You need to make this change now. The founder needs to have objective voices, advisors, investors who ask very hard questions and get the founder to see the situation, every situation, for what it is. 2, another reason why founders might not come out and say it is there's a level that exposing failure is really uncomfortable. I screwed up and I don't have all the answers is one of the hardest things to say to anyone, let alone investors who committed their capital and emotional aspirations to the founder and their startup journey. So founders might mask the company's struggles in a veneer of optimism, like, we'll just have to continue to push on. But here's the good news for founders. There's no need to be overly optimistic because investors can handle the truth. Whether or not we are investors in that company or not, we can handle the truth. If investors haven't been in the game long enough, they know that founders have incredible strengths, but also dire weaknesses. That's the case for each founder. No exception, no matter how great the company is. Furthermore, the majority of LPs and funds and angel investors are business owners. They know how to run a successful business. They didn't arrive to their professional success by accident. This means they've had their fair share of balancing the tension of optimism and realness. They get it. They get that you aren't perfect. By avoiding optimism, getting real when the going is tough, you don't have anything to lose, but rather have everything to gain. One of my top 10 books is called Good to Great. One of my favorite chapters from that book is called Confronting the Brutal Facts. In the book, the author Jim Collins does a robust analysis of a number of companies and the qualities that made the super performers perform and the competitive firms falter. He notes that confronting the brutal facts about a situation is one of the key differences between the two sets of companies. He writes, quote, you absolutely cannot make a series of good decisions without first confronting the brutal facts. The good to great companies operated in accordance with this principle, and the comparison companies generally did not. Confronting the brutal facts acknowledges the depth of the truth of what you are facing. No sugarcoating, no optimism, just realness. Yes, leadership creates vision, but leadership is ultimately about creating a climate where the truth is heard and the brutal facts confronted. Collins goes on to say, both sets of companies had access to the same information. The key then lies in not in better information, but in turning information into information that cannot be ignored. Collins lastly then references an interview that he did with Admiral Jim Stockdale. Stockdale says, here's a very important lesson. You must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they might be. Faith that you will prevail in the end and confronting the brutal facts of your situation that inform your decision-making are two different things. To be completely transparent with you. To be completely transparent with you is one of the phrases that I've grown to love hearing from founders. It shows that, metaphorically speaking, the founder's mask is coming off and the founder is getting real with me. They then typically share something private about how they think or feel about a certain aspect of their business, their fundraise, or even a fellow stakeholder in their business. Typically, what they share is tied to an insecure belief about their fundraise or part of their business that they're either leveling with me on or they want to get my perspective on. I, as an investor, want any founder to be completely transparent with me. And it also shows a level of trust or security that person has in their relationship with me to share that key piece of information. Now, I weed out if this transparency is just a one-time move or an ongoing pattern of this person's life, which ideally it's an ongoing pattern of that person's life. So hopefully it won't be the first time that I hear this phrase or something similar if I continue in future conversations with the founder. But the moment that the founder is transparent with investors is the moment that you have gained an ally or allies to help you in the trenches. Back to my journal entry as a founder that day. August 18th, 2018 was a day that I got real with the brutal facts in the situation of my startup. Here's another part of my journal entry from that day. I read a bit in Good to Great today, and a chapter especially on confronting the brutal fact. In the last week or two, I've been feeling that we need to get real. We need to acknowledge the situation we're in instead of letting inertia carry us into the wild blue yonder and letting the weeks pass. I'm sick of this not working out. I'm sick of hearing that this problem needs to be solved and other people's belief in us, and we aren't able to convert anyone. I'm sick of the chatter. I'm sick of the talk. I want to go out and freaking blow this thing like the opportunity we and everyone else are convinced that it is. However, the story takes a nasty spin because at the end, it was too late. Months later, I discovered it was too late. By the time I confronted the brutal facts in my startup on August 18th, 2018, and made changes, it was too late. We didn't have enough cash in the bank to correct the long stretch of poor execution. Poor execution completely grounded in optimism that was not based in the reality of my situation. See, my fintech startup failed for a number of reasons, which I will unfold over time in this newsletter. But one in particular, which I'm acutely aware of, is that I did not execute with the realism necessary. I did not confront the brutal facts of many, many things in the business. Just a few examples: how customers were not biting. Perhaps we needed to make a dramatic pivot. That my co-founder wasn't pulling his weight. That perhaps I didn't possess the market expertise needed to pull this off, and on and on and on. Closing thoughts. I've grown dramatically in this area since then, largely because of seeing the dangers of this pattern of pervasive optimism, regardless of the true reality. There may be founders out there who resonate with this story. Founders that realize that they might not be seeing the situation as accurately as they ought to be. As I didn't confront the brutal facts until it was too late, my hope is that you have an opportunity, that you can get real with your company, those around you, your investors, and confront the brutal facts about the situation. As you do, you'll find allies that can help you in the trenches. But wait, don't wait too long. Like it or not, you are on the clock. So take a shot. Make the move. Thanks for checking out the Tundra Angels angle. Let me know if you have any feedback, comments, questions on this. Let me just highlight a couple articles that are recent that I wrote. Pick up the castle or reroute the moat, the key question in startup defensibility. Tale of two fundraising founders. That was a really fun one. Why we passed in the startup, episode 8. And 2 types of investor conviction. Why startups on the cap table do not change the underlying startup opportunity. Quick FYI, my wife and I are going to have another child, and probably in the next week. So I am going to be taking next week off from writing this, taking some time with family, and enjoying our growing family. So hope everyone's doing well, and we'll be in touch with you soon.